Welcome back to your live continuing coverage of NAB 2019, NAB New York, here at the Jacob K. Javits Center in New York City. I'm Michael Artsis. This is BeTerrific. Thanks so much for joining us. I've got a great guest and, of course, my co-host, Brian Stillman. Our guest is a very distinguished gentleman. He is the man responsible for putting together NAB New York as well as NAB Las Vegas and all of the conventions. His team takes care of all this. Chris Brown is joining us. Chris, thanks so much for joining us.
Oh, thanks. Great to be here.
NAB is an amazing show. It's the National Association of Broadcasters Convention. It's been going on forever in Las Vegas. At some point, I believe there was some kind of East Coast show in the early days that went away.
Right.
And in, I think, 2016 or 17, I guess it's 16 now probably.
Yep. It's actually before. We bought this between 14 and 15. Our first show was 14.
So in around 2014, you guys bought this show that was an existing tech trade show here, and you said, okay, we're going to have an NAB New York, and now you do. And I got to tell you something. We'll talk about the big show in Vegas in a minute. I am so impressed. I did not think that you guys, not you guys, I didn't think that that show was going to last, and I didn't think you would be able to turn this around because NAB in Vegas has such a presence. What has happened here is marvelous. You're packed with people. I think the show will continue to grow. I think that you'll take up more space here at Javits, and I think it's very needed in New York.
Thanks. I really appreciate those comments. I mean, a lot of folks put a lot of hard work into it, a lot of sweat. And, you know, we, just like the industry, you know, we understand kind of what some of the challenges have been. There's been a lot going on over the last few years in particular. When we bought the show, we took a little bit of a bet. I mean, we, like you, looked at the event and weren't sure ultimately what the value was. But from our standpoint, there were a lot of reasons that it made sense for us to have a brand here, a flagship event here in New York. Obviously, just this is the epicenter of, you know, the media sector. We've got all our networks. We've got the cable networks. We've got, you know, digital growing here. So many sides of the media and entertainment industry are here, and it's still growing, which is great. And now, in fact, what's great about this side of town is this side of town is evolving as well, which wasn't true when we first bought the show. It was still a bit of an isolated spot.
Which I'm sure you, like I, would have said that's never going to happen because they've been talking about it for 30 years,
right.
And all of a sudden Hudson Yards is here and people are flocking to the west side,
right.
And that's a tremendous piece of infrastructure that has changed. The industry is changing so much, Chris. You've got OTTs that are exploding. You've got esports. 3 years ago wasn't even a consideration. Now it's a headlining event at NAB.
Mm-hmm.
You've got Disney building studios in the New York metro area.
Mm-hmm.
You've got all sorts of Apple is going to be creating content.
Right.
Talk about how you guys at NAB are able to keep you have to be ahead of all this stuff, know where it's going and plan for it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the good news is that there's no shortage of appetite for video. So there's more video content being created now than ever before. That's the awesome thing. The challenge is that obviously the distribution channels, the way it's packaged, how it's being delivered, it's all changing. Everybody's trying to figure out where the chair is all going to stop when this kind of change process finally begins to at least slow down. Probably never stops. But from our standpoint, it is all about mostly listening. I mean, we don't do this in a vacuum. We can't do this in a vacuum. In fact, it's good folks like you, the other technology providers who are here. It's our customers. It's our members and our folks that come to the show in Las Vegas, and that's a big pool of people. We have to do a lot of listening. We have to understand, and we do that. We do that through traditional methods. We also do that through informal methods. But it's constantly kind of pinging the industry, trying to understand where these things are headed, asking them questions about that. How are they viewing it? How are they focused on it? How should we be addressing it? We can't answer all the questions for them, but our job is to facilitate that, to kind of, suss up the questions and kind of tease that up so that people have a forum to kind of debate that and, share ideas so that they can kind of work it out. We can all work it out together.
I think one of the things that a lot of people know and many people don't about NAB is that it's also about education. It really started not necessarily as a place to go pick out your next camera equipment or your next server or how to transmit video. It started as a way that the industry could get together and say, what are you doing? What's working? What are you doing? What's working? And learn from each other. And it's evolved so much to the fact that one of the main goals of NAB that is beautifully done is that you have panels, you have all sorts of great educational experiences. It's also happening on the floor now. I'll give you an example. Black Magic is doing lessons on Da Vinci, and there are tutorials. But you guys have great panels, great workshops, and there's a whole lot more to NAB even before the shows or the exhibit shows start.
Right. Yeah. No, I appreciate. Flattery will get you everywhere, by the way. So I appreciate all of this. Yeah. So we started as a broadcast technology event, a broadcast engineering event, very specific job function. That job function's completely changed now, but that was the roots of why people were getting together. And the show's been around for a long time in Las Vegas, plus 90 years. So, these folks got together because there were very specific technical requirements. Things were driven by the technology, and that technology was evolving over time. And certainly the internet has changed a lot of things, but those needs have evolved. The education needs have changed. They've gotten deeper in a lot of respects, but then they've also touched a much wider swath of functions within the industry, sectors within the industry, sectors that relate to the industry. So really, yeah, that education piece has always been fundamentally a key piece of what we do at the show. Because again, the idea is that we've got to bring people together so that they can share ideas, share best practices, understand where things are heading. People come to the show because they want to know what's next. And you can do some of that here in walking a trade show floor, and you'll learn as you go. But it's hard. So some of that's got to be served up, and that's what that education program does.
I want to tell you quickly my first NAB experience. I was 18 years old. My father had gone to NAB every year doing video walls and visual displays on television. I was a young broadcaster. I was a journalist doing radio and television, and I wanted a job.
Right.
And I thought NAB is the place to go.
Yeah.
I made 50 radio demos and 50. Those were CDs. I made 50 DVDs of my TV reel.
Right.
I sat in a lot of the panel discussions and outside, learned a lot, and then cherry-picked the news directors as they came out and said, I'd like to hand you, or the station managers from radio, I'd like to hand you my demo reel.
Right.
They said, well, we don't take tapes here because how are we going to take everybody's tape and carry it in our suitcase? I said, DVD. They couldn't say no. I had a wonderful learning experience, a wonderful week, came home, and a week later got a call.
Oh, it's fantastic.
From a guy named Jeff Shell. He said, I'm the general manager of a station in New Jersey. I've got your reel right here. I'd like to interview you for a job.
Perfect.
And I said, great. Can I come today?
Sure, why not?
And I got that job as the assistant news director, anchor, and reporter of Channel 10 News, and the rest is history.
Yeah, so it's a great community, right? I mean, I think, television broadcast, radio broadcast, all community-based. A lot of folks been in this business, and they're in this business with passion. And I think they really appreciate having the opportunity to mentor young, up-and-coming folks, to groom new talent. That's an aspect that's kind of baked into all of these events. It may not be, why every executive is coming to the show necessarily, but if they have the opportunity to do that, this industry is no different than any other industry. There is a need to inject, new young talent into it. That has been consistent for a long time, and it's, sort of grown in the last few years. Digital's a nice shiny thing. Everybody wants to run to that. So there are folks on this side who kind of need to have those kind of dialogues, need to be exposed to people who are interested and excited about being in the business.
And I believe in paying it forward. I know this guy's got about 20 questions for you, and I haven't given him a word edgewise.
It's, the big show's out in Las Vegas, obviously, but here in New York, the heart of the sort of broadcast industry, how important is it to make a show like this work here, and to have a show like that, like NAB here in the city?
Totally critical. Again, this is. So there's an audience here, and when we came in to kind of look at the opportunity here, the reality is all you have to do is kind of look at the data, really look at the number of people who are in our world who live, in the tri-state area, and then we knew in Vegas that we've been drawing some of those people, but certainly not the entire population. So there was a big unserved, piece of the industry that we knew was here. That was one. The second thing for us is, things are changing so rapidly that the industry needs more than one time a year to get together and really dig into these things. And as you just said, what better place to do that than in New York? We're in Las Vegas. That's been around and, again, has established itself as its own community that drives to that show. But there was an unserved need, I think, really sitting here. And this the city represents a dynamic and draws it, can pull an audience that we just couldn't duplicate really anywhere else.
What are some of the challenges of doing two shows? It's you get everybody pulling out all the stops to go out to Vegas, and then you're saying, okay, let's do it again. What are some of the challenges of a populated show like this?
Well, first of all, the one challenge we knew we would run into, which we did pretty much right away, is that we could not, or something we had to overcome is that we couldn't set people up assuming that their expectation coming here was that they would get what they get in Vegas.
Okay.
We cannot duplicate what we do in Vegas here. So initially, there were people coming to the show who said, oh, it's an NAB show. I expect what I'm getting there. They come here, they go, ooh, wow, this is not quite it. So for us, that's meant that we have to really work hard to kind of drive additional value in this event to kind of really sell the unique aspects of it that make it work. And some of that is just in... the positives actually are in the size and the type of dynamic that occurs here versus what happens in Vegas. We've gotten lots of feedback from folks that have been in the industry for a long, long time who say, look, Vegas is great. I can take it all in. I get a great sense of the big trends that are happening, but I struggle to get to the things that I really need. I even struggle sometimes to get to the exhibitors that I need. If I do, I might get 10 minutes or 15 minutes, and then I'm running to another thing. Here, you have an opportunity to kind of, spend quality time with people, actually dig in a little bit deeper, and you're not going to feel, rushed to the next thing.
How do you emphasize that? As someone organizing the show, how do you say, okay, here are those unique opportunities, those unique positives of a show like this, different than Las Vegas? What are you doing to kind of make those, to emphasize those, to make those something that people can really take advantage of?
Yeah, so it's evolved, I think. I think, the initially... and some of this was what we inherited, from the previous owner in terms of how they had approached certain aspects of this, including the educational component. What we've tried to do is really sell a slightly different experience. And we do have education on the exhibit floor in Las Vegas, similar to what we do here, but it's delivered in a slightly different way. Here, it's much more integrated. It is meant and it's built around everything that's happening on the show floor. So we've worked hard to kind of get to that point. And I'll use a maybe overused term, sort of curate more of what's actually going on and happening there versus leaving it up to chance. Now we've evolved from that to understanding that that doesn't take us far enough, that we actually do need to now facilitate what's happening, and this is requiring us to kind of inject some new services, some new skills even from our side, and we're working with other partners to help us, but we are now building services into this event. We'll build some similar services into Las Vegas in the future as well, where we are actually matching folks ahead of time. We're actually setting up appointments, going to buyers and saying, look, we really want to understand what your needs are. We have a good sense and we have a great set of exhibitors here. Let us help you kind of determine the best way to shop this event. And let's make it efficient for you. Because people are looking for more of those, one-on-one, deep interactions, meaningful interactions, and they have to be able to deliver that in this kind of event.
What does it take to put on a show like this, even though it's much smaller than Vegas? What does it take? Vegas, I'm sure it takes the second you're done. You're not even the second. You're already planning the next one as the first one starts.
Yeah.
What about here? Is it a full year process?
Oh, absolutely. They have to be really the same, very similar process. I mean, there are a lot of moving parts. It's complex. Almost any event you do, even if it's a little smaller than this, there are always a lot of moving parts. And so we are pre-planning, as you said, more than a year out for this event, for Vegas as well. We have to, because to some extent we're coming in here knowing a few things, ahead of time, including when it's going to be, where it's going to be. Here it's a little easier because we kind of understand some of that. Although the when can be a little challenging, you never know. New York has a thing called Comic-Con, which tends to rule the October calendar.
That's right.
And so we've been bumped a little bit. Next year actually will be a week later because of Comic-Con. But we understand those dynamics. What we have to do then again is listen to the feedback that we're getting from the folks who are participating here, understand how we can continue to evolve it, how we can make it better. So it's an ongoing process. Yeah.
Is it going to? Do you see it growing physically in space, and will it add some of the Vegas type things? For instance, the sprocket area, the launch pad.
Yeah, so this has been one of the things that, yes, I mean, the short answer is yes. We have, I think, arrived at the conclusion that what we need to be able to do is draw some of the best of Las Vegas to this event. Sprocket is a pretty good example of that. But then we also need to build unique aspects here. Again, it needs to be a different type of experience. Not that we're trying to give everybody, 2 different opportunities and attract them twice. But that's okay too. But then again, we're trying to deliver to this market, things that make sense to this market. So that might mean perhaps more focus in the future on the advertising segment. That might mean more, focus in the future on the digital pieces that are building here. Those kinds of things. Startup and innovation, though, I think that's sort of a fundamental, which is what Sprocket is all about, and those are the kinds of things that make sense to kind of bring to
Well,
this.
you've definitely brought a lot of value here, and I think it's great, and I do see it continuing to grow. I like what you're saying, and I like to keep it different. I do like the aspect that you get more face time with people here. It's a little bit more relaxed. They seem to like that, too.
Right.
A couple quick things, and then I got to get to your NAB story, because we're storytellers, ultimately, and I need that.
Sure.
What about esports? Esports is still booming. It's becoming bigger and bigger and bigger. What is happening with esports in your mind here and also in Vegas?
Yeah, I see it doing nothing but growing. It's such a tremendous. Not only is it a growing sector, but the opportunities and the synergies, I know I hate using that word, it always comes up, but the synergies that sort of exist between the traditional media space and what's happening in that space. It's a live event. It's another opportunity to broadcast. It's another opportunity to produce. It links to everything that our industry is about. And what's interesting is, as we've dug into this more and we've connected to more of the companies that are kind of at the forefront of what's happening in esports, they recognize that as well. So some of these are definitely folks who don't come from a traditional media world, but they know they need it, right? They understand the value of that.
I think that they're growing up and getting a lot more traditional in the
Right.
way they do things,
Yep.
which is important. And the industry is seeing what they're doing with audience engagement and interaction and chat rooms and all this stuff, and bringing that to the traditional side, which is really interesting.
Yeah.
All right. Tell me about your NAB story.
Well, we could. I'm not sure where to start with that, but I've been around NAB for about 20 years, so I've seen it go through some interesting evolutions. I've been through a couple of the recessions, which was interesting. For me, the sort of satisfying part of that was to see, what the show represents. You get in those tougher times, you understand, in a much clearer sense what the show represents to the community, to the industry, and to see its sustaining power, was really terrific. I mean, we were able to rebound. Took a little longer after the first 2000-2001 recession than it did this last one, although it was deeper, but we rebounded much quicker. I think some of that was driven by the fact that the industry was already in a state of evolution and was moving pretty quickly towards some new things.
How did you get to NAB?
I by accident. It's a classic case of, so I'm not from the media and entertainment, not from the broadcast side. I actually, believe it or not, I was in the world of software, working for way back when, I'm going to reveal my age, but was one of the big 8 accounting firms. Now there are 3 or 4. And I was a software developer, essentially, and I was not smart enough to figure out where the opportunity was in that, but mostly understood that I didn't really want to sit behind a screen the rest of my life, that my interests, my skills were, more pointed towards spending some time with people, growing communities, doing this type. So, and I didn't know what this ultimately meant either. So I didn't know what nonprofits were either. It was one of those things where I had a friend who ended up working in a place, and he sort of said, "Hey, there's a job over here working on a trade show." And I said, "I don't know, what's that? What's an association? I don't know what that's all about. But what is it?" And it was sales. I also didn't know if I wanted to sell. So it was all one of those things where I said, well, you know what? I don't want to be behind the screen. Let me go see what I can do. And, pretty much from day one, I said, oh, yeah, this is definitely much more interesting for me overall. And that's kind of been, the path I've followed.
It seems like there aren't as many launches or product debuts here as there are in Vegas. Is that something you hope to change, or you feel very good about where everything's at?
Definitely hope to change. I think from my standpoint, again, given the rapid rate of change, given the need to kind of continually update folks, this should be a place where people are looking to come bring announcements, bring new product, innovation, that type of thing, which is why something like Sprocket or, a startup-focused program would make a lot of sense, because that'll inject new pieces in general. It's just, this is what you learn when you kind of jump into these kinds of things and it's new. It takes a little time for people to get, it took 2 or 3 years before people even knew it was an NAB-owned event, even after we branded it. They went, really? It's an NAB show? We're like, yeah, we've actually owned it for a couple of years. So it's just, you have to kind of continue to build that, reinforce those messages. We've got to give them reasons. So part of what we have to be able to do is recognize the new product announcements and innovations. So we're looking at award programs, other things, ways to showcase new. We have to kind of help stimulate that.
Chris, I can't thank you enough. It's been fabulous here. Like I said, I see the show growing. I'm very impressed. It's been wonderful for us. We launched the product here, by the way.
Great.
I'm going to show it to you when we're
off
camera, and I'm going to show it to the viewers now. Thank you so much,
Great.
Chris Brown.
Thank
Great
you,
having you on.
Enjoyed it.
We love NAB, and thank you for Melissa and everybody who works with you, Michelle as well, and Brian.
Thank you for all the kind words. Appreciate it.
This is your NAB 2019 continuing coverage from New York on BeTerrific. I'm Michael Artsis. Stay with us.